Hey folks, Matt from artoftheimage.com. Looking at the specs for the Sigma SD1. Have had a lot of questions about this, and there's a lot of uproar on the internet about it because it came out at an announced price of 9,700 US dollars. So, going through the specs, having a look here. For those of you that aren't aware of the Sigma SD1 technology, it uses a Foveon sensor, which is a little different than a regular sensor in the sense that, no pun intended, it has layered photo sites, if you want to call them that. Basically, different colors of light can penetrate different light depths. And that's what the Foveon sensor takes advantage of. So if you want to think of it as stacked receptor sites, so red's going to go a certain depth, green's going to go a certain depth, blue's going to go a certain depth. So it's all recording them at different depths in the photo site on the sensor. Now don't get confused and think that that's actually 15 megapixels times 3 and it's a 46 megapixel sensor like Sigma is kind of alluding to. That's not the case. It's essentially a 15 megapixel sensor. It's just that each photo site is set up to measure the color of the that's coming in, the RGB color, at different depths. In comparison, a standard sensor that's like in my D7000 that's filming this, or pretty much any other DSLR for the most part, has an RGB Bayer filter, and what that does is it filters out it's in front of the sensor, and it filters in the light coming in into RGB pattern, which is red, green, blue, and that's how the sensor is able to take the color information and arrange it into the picture that you see your camera gets. So anyways, sorry for those of you that knew that. For those of you that didn't, hope that's helpful. The Foveon sensor, kind of an interesting exotic beast. Really, as far as I know, Sigma is the only one that's used this sensor. It does it has in past had some incredible reviews, had some incredible image quality seen from it, and certain photographers have raved about it, how sharp it is and whatnot. The comments tend to be that you get a better image when you don't have to have that RGB Bayer filter in front of it. So Sigma's alluding and saying that it's a 46, 45 megapixel sensor, and why they're saying this is they're saying it would be equivalent to having 3 layers of sensor sites. So as if you had 15 megapixel sensor stacked times 3, but you don't. You have a 15 megapixel sensor absorbing the light at different depths. So it's a little bit of a misnomer to be saying this is a 45, 46 megapixel camera. I will say that it's probably more equivalent to a 20 megapixel camera or something like that, based on what I've seen of past Sigma cameras. In reality, will the image quality be any different than something you'll get out of a D7000 or the Canon 60D 18 megapixel sensor? No, I don't think so. I think you're going to see basically the same image quality. So we're really looking at a 15 megapixel sensor here. Okay, so 9,700 US, and apparently B&H has it out now at 67 or 6,900. It's been lowered to 6,900 US dollars at B&H. I have here. So came out at a ridiculous price, caused an uproar. Already within a few days, been dropped to 6,900. This sets a bad precedent because, like putting a house on the market, if you keep dropping your price at very close intervals, people are going to wonder what the heck's wrong with the camera. So let's look at the specs. 15 megapixels, ISO 100 to 6400, 11-point autofocus sensor, all cross-type, 5 frames per second, 460,000 dot LCD screen, shutters capable of a 1/8,000th of a second and rated for 100,000 cycles, and it does have the AF fine-tuning. So, nothing here that we wouldn't expect to see in a $1,000 DSLR. Nothing that the D7000 doesn't have, nothing that the D5100 doesn't have, or the T3i has. In fact, the 460,000 dot LCD is subpar. The the Canon T3i, the 600D, and the D5100, the D7000, D90, all these cameras have a 920,000 or 1 million plus LCD screen. So subpar LCD screen on the SD1. ISO range 100 to 6400. It's okay, but it's almost a generation behind now. Most cameras we're seeing will go above that. They'll go to 12-800. I'm not going to knock it for that, but again, it's not a class-leading ISO, which they're pricing this camera at a class-leading price. What else do we have here? 5 frames per second. That's okay. It's not bad. It's not great. It's average. The 11-point AF sensor, all cross-type. On paper, that sounds good. Historically, autofocus has not been Sigma's strong point in their cameras. So I'm not really expecting this to be a stunning autofocus camera. I would expect that the Canon 60D, the T3i will beat it, and that the D7000 will run circles around it. I would expect my D90 will have better autofocus. That's my thoughts on it, preliminary. And the shutter capable of a 1/8,000th of a second. That's fine. That's good. That's good for high-speed sync. However, rated at 100,000 cycles, this is definitely a consumer cycle rating, and certainly not something we would expect to see in a pro body priced at $10,000. Fact of the matter is, the specs on this camera, it's basically a $1,000 camera. The build quality is probably going to be on par with a $1,000 camera, something in between probably the Canon T3i and the 60D range, or between the D5100 and the D7000 range. So really what we have essentially here is a $1,000 camera, maybe a $1,500 camera at best. But when we look at the price points that the 60D is at, and we look at the price point that the D7000 is at, I'm going to say no, it's a $1,000 camera, the SD1, and yet they come out at 10 grand. So the price is too high. The sensor isn't a true 45 megapixel sensor. It's a 15 megapixel sensor. Don't be thinking we got a 45 megapixel sensor here. It's equivalent to medium format, so they can sell it at that price. That's just not the case. When the image quality is shown in more detail, and from what I've seen of the images they've posted already, nothing fantastic, nothing spectacular. I can do better with my 7000, or I can do better with my 60D. Build quality isn't up to par on Sigma DSLRs in standard. I'd rather have a Nikon or Canon. The AF, not up to par historically, so I'm not expecting great things out of this one. The LCD, subpar even for a $1,000 camera, so certainly ridiculous for a $10,000 camera. And let's bear in mind the competition here. D3X, 1DS Mark III, 1D Mark IV, the coming D3 or D4X. We've got the Leica M9, and geez, we've got the Pentax 645D at 10 grand. I'd take that in a heartbeat over the SD1. There's no comparison here, folks. If you're going to compare shots out of the 645D medium format DSLR Pentax versus this SD1, it's going to walk all over it and kick it to the curb. So basically, 10 grand is ludicrous. $6,900 for this camera is ludicrous. So, I mean, even the 5D Mark III that's coming out soon, we hope, is probably going to be priced around $3,000. So, you know, less than half of what this of the $6,900 price point, less than a third of what they originally announced it at. I mean, the 5D Mark II is a very good camera for imaging quality, and it's, you know, available at about $2,500 if you shop around, maybe even less. So, and I think if you compare the image quality from the SD1 to the 5D Mark II, the 5D Mark II is going to walk all over the SD1. So what we have here is an initial Sigma fail. Somebody in Sigma probably got a brain fart and thought, hey, let's put this at $10,000. We'll make everybody think it's equivalent to a 45 megapixel medium format camera, and we'll cause a big uproar. And I think it's going to backfire on them. I think it already is backfiring on them. I think this camera should have been priced at $1,000 to $1,200, and they might have sold some then. $10,000, ridiculous. They won't sell any. $6,900, still absurd, and won't sell any. So they're going to have to keep moving the price down, which is going to scare people off because they're going to think, why would I buy it at that price? It's going to keep coming down. They may end up having to sell this camera at $800 just to move a few. So that's my thoughts on the SD1. Interesting camera, but ridiculously priced and nowhere near anything to justify that price point. Let me know your comments on the SD1, if you agree with me, if you have any other further comments, any other insight, or if you disagree with me, let me know too. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon with some new video posts, some new articles. We'll keep up to date with what's going on in the world of photography here at artoftheimage.com. Thanks.